Today, we delve into the turbulent political debate surrounding China and the views of the UK opposition leader, Keir Starmer, on this important international issue. While Starmer openly criticises the government's actions, advocating for a tougher stance against China, his statements often oversimplify the complexity of diplomatic and economic relations. In this video, we will explore why his approach may prove counterproductive and how it could endanger both international security and British national interests. The military threat from China. A key point in Starmer's critique is China's growing military presence in the Taiwan Strait. Recently, the region has become a flashpoint, with China conducting military drills that have alarmed neighbouring countries and Western governments alike. Starmer has expressed concern over these developments, accusing the UK government of being too soft in its approach towards Beijing. He also criticised the British Foreign Office for reportedly obstructing the visit of Taiwan's former president to the UK, calling this a betrayal of democratic values and a weakening of support for Taiwan. At first glance, this argument may resonate with those who are worried about China's increasingly assertive foreign policy. However, Starmer's criticism ignores the delicate balance that the UK must maintain in its relations with China. The Taiwan Strait is a highly sensitive area where geopolitics, military strategy, and international trade converge. Taking an overly confrontational stance could escalate tensions, not only in East Asia, but also in the broader global context. The UK, like many other Western nations, faces a diplomatic tightrope when dealing with China. On one hand, it is crucial to stand firm in supporting democratic allies like Taiwan. On the other, aggressive rhetoric or actions could provoke retaliation from China, leading to a deterioration of trade and economic relations. Given that China is one of the UK's largest trading partners, such a fallout could have serious consequences for British businesses, jobs, and economic stability. It's worth noting that China accounts for a significant portion of global trade, and any disruption to relations could impact not only the UK, but also its European allies, many of whom rely on Chinese goods and services. Starmer's failure to acknowledge this complexity in his critique suggests that his approach, while sounding bold, could have unintended negative effects. A more measured response, focused on diplomacy and long-term strategy, is needed to manage the situation in the Taiwan Strait effectively. The politically motivated imprisonment of Jimmy Lai. The case of Jimmy Lai, a British citizen and pro-democracy activist in Hong Kong, is another issue that Starmer has seized upon. Lai has been imprisoned under Hong Kong's draconian national security law, which was imposed by China in 2020. Starmer has accused the UK government of failing to do enough to secure Lai's release, demanding that Britain apply more pressure on Hong Kong and Chinese authorities to address what he sees as a politically motivated imprisonment. While Starmer's call for action is understandable, the solution is far from straightforward. The situation in Hong Kong has been deteriorating for years, with Beijing tightening its grip on the former British colony. The imposition of the national security law has eroded the freedoms that were guaranteed under the One Country, Two Systems agreement when Hong Kong was handed back to China in 1997. However, direct intervention by the UK risks not only further straining its relationship with China, but also making the situation worse for Hong Kong citizens. Starmer's suggestion that the UK should apply stronger pressure may sound appealing, but it overlooks the complex geopolitical reality. Beijing has shown little willingness to bend to international pressure, especially on what it considers internal matters like Hong Kong. Furthermore, heavy-handed interference could jeopardise the safety and rights of the over 300,000 British citizens living in Hong Kong. The broader issue here is how to navigate human rights advocacy while maintaining effective diplomatic relations. A nuanced strategy that combines public diplomacy with behind-the-scenes engagement is far more likely to yield results than aggressive posturing. The UK must work with international partners to raise awareness of Lai's plight and pressure China, but it must also be cautious about the potential blowback from too direct an approach. China's role in the war in Ukraine. Starmer has also voiced concerns about China's indirect involvement in the war in Ukraine. He argues that the UK government has not done enough to hold China accountable for its support of Russia, particularly in terms of supplying military components and technology to the Russian war effort. Starmer advocates for sanctions against Chinese companies involved in aiding Russia. While Starmer's call for sanctions may seem morally justified, there are significant practical concerns. China's role in the war in Ukraine is undoubtedly problematic, but imposing sanctions could have far-reaching consequences. China is one of the UK's largest trading partners, and a blanket approach to sanctions could harm British companies that rely on Chinese imports and exports. It could also damage critical global supply chains, affecting everything from technology to pharmaceuticals. Moreover, sanctioning Chinese firms could push Beijing closer to Moscow, further solidifying the Russia-China alliance and complicating efforts to isolate Russia on the international stage. Instead of acting rashly, the UK needs to work in concert with its allies to develop a comprehensive strategy that targets Chinese entities involved in supporting Russia without damaging broader UK-China relations. Sanctions, while a powerful tool, should be used judiciously. The UK must weigh the potential benefits of punishing Chinese companies against the risks of escalating economic tensions with Beijing. Starmer's one-size-fits-all approach to sanctions risks harming the UK's economic interests without necessarily achieving the desired political outcomes. Chinese influence on British universities. Starmer has also raised the alarm about China's influence on British universities, accusing the government of failing to protect academic freedom from foreign interference. He claims that Chinese influence has crept into UK academic institutions through funding, research collaborations, and the presence of Chinese students. It is true that China has become a major player in global education, with thousands of Chinese students studying at UK universities. These students contribute significantly to the financial health of institutions across the country. However, Starmer's portrayal of Chinese influence as a looming threat may be exaggerated. While there are concerns about academic freedom and research security, many experts argue that the benefits of international collaboration far outweigh the risks. Universities have long been hubs of international exchange, and partnerships with Chinese institutions have produced cutting-edge research in fields such as technology, medicine, and climate science. Cutting ties with China or restricting collaborations would not only hurt British universities financially, but also slow down scientific progress. Starmer's critique overlooks the safeguards already in place to protect academic freedom and research integrity. UK universities are well aware of the risks associated with foreign funding and influence, and they have implemented measures to ensure that sensitive research remains protected. Rather than proposing drastic measures, the focus should be on strengthening existing safeguards and ensuring transparency in research collaborations. Economic consequences of Starmer's approach. One of the overarching themes in Starmer's criticism of the UK's China policy is his failure to fully grasp the economic consequences of a hardline approach. China is a vital trading partner for the UK, and its importance has only grown in recent years. In 2022, trade between the two countries was valued at over £100 billion, making China one of the UK's largest export markets. Starmer's calls for sanctions, increased diplomatic pressure, and reduced cooperation with China could have devastating effects on the UK economy. British industries, ranging from manufacturing to higher education, rely heavily on Chinese investment and trade. Disrupting these ties could lead to job losses, reduced economic growth, and increased costs for consumers. Furthermore, at a time when the UK is already grappling with the economic fallout from Brexit, the COVID-19 pandemic, and the war in Ukraine, a trade war with China would be disastrous. It would exacerbate inflation, strain public finances, and limit the government's ability to invest in domestic priorities like healthcare, education, and infrastructure. Keir Starmer's criticism of the UK's China policy is rooted in legitimate concerns about human rights, security, and foreign influence. However, his approach is often overly simplistic and fails to account for the complexities of international relations. While it is important to stand firm on issues like Taiwan's security and human rights abuses in Hong Kong, the UK must tread carefully to avoid damaging its economic and diplomatic ties with China. Rather than adopting a confrontational stance, the UK should pursue a balanced approach that combines firm action on critical issues with pragmatic diplomacy. Starmer's rhetoric may win him support among those who favour a tougher line on China, but it risks creating more problems than it solves. The UK needs a strategy that protects its interests without isolating itself from one of the world's most powerful and influential nations.